So welcome, our beloved colleague Liz. As always, we begin all things by acknowledging the original stewards, the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who towards our compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we share, build, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Liz, thank you so much for your leadership, your remarkable visionary leadership. And could you please introduce yourself to our viewers, our listeners, and share a little bit about your remarkable work?
Well, hello, Victor, and thank you. And I do pay tribute to our ancestors and the ancestors before us, Indigenous peoples who have kept the land so we can be here. I am Liza Arnason, nickname Liz. I am a Black disabled woman, was a sole support parent, and has been in the university system, in assistant dean of student life, international and community. I have taught at university level. I have worked and volunteered in the community, and I frame all my work through the voices and lived experiences of those who have had these experiences of being Black and disabled and all the other intersectionalities. My work is grounded as I came across her work when I was in school in the 80s, university in Calgary, Audre Lorde. And this is a person who has shaped the way I think about life and going forward. I absolutely took all of this knowledge, my lived experience and the experiences of decades, and formed an organization because of a gap, a hole, a void in any kind of conversation or discussions around Black people with disabilities, both visible and invisible. And we created an organization called ASE Community Foundation for Black Canadians with Disabilities. ASE is a Yoruba word, has many different ways of use today, but we took it from the ancient sense of your ability to, the essence of the person, the power to manifest something into existence. So I say, so will be. And that's why we call ourselves ASE. So we say people are going to see us, they're going to value us, and we're going to be included and prospering, thriving as leaders, business owners, CEOs, parents, you name it, we're there. That's our vision. That's what we see.
That's
Ashe.
absolutely beautiful. Ashe, indeed, indeed. Yeah, thank you so much for your candid transparency. And once again, your visionary leadership and all that you do for so many. So let me ask you another question. What inspires you about your work currently?
Oh, well, the life that I have lived, always being in that space of always being, feeling like the family with the only Black family in the school, feeling that what our voices, what we want to read, how we interpret things, the way we see the world is just not there growing up. So I've always been the resistor. I've always been the underdog, and I like that spot. And I love that spot of resisting where the nuances is. Some people call it the gray area. I actually just use the word nuances. There's not gray, they're there. It's not one or the other. I feel them, and as a Black person, you know what I'm talking about. As a person with disabilities, you know what I'm talking about. As a woman, you know what I'm talking about. But then there's that special space in between. So what motivates me to do what I'm doing is those little spaces that I see that I can blow up, put on blast, I want to say, and start digging at it. So identify that, create, research it, create that model, build something to support it, and walk away. So it might be building something, building someone, building a community, building an infrastructure. That's what I like to do. And then I just move on. And what motivates me is the fact that I've been doing this now. I'm almost in my mid-50s. I've been doing it. And even though people said equity work is so difficult, It must be so difficult to be in a role and also carry equity, even though it's not in your role, and also be the only Black woman, or the only woman of color, or the only this and the only that, carrying this and bringing people up with you while taking all the hits and the lashes that come with it. The motivation is, you can see it in people, that they take the torch, that they honor their ancestors, that they understand that work. And so for me, if it's a brick into a wall, or if it's a brick out of a wall, that's what motivates me. I see things as a much bigger picture, and I see that people will make that change. And it's my job to provide those atmospheres, the environments, the teachings, the coachings, the eldership on knowing how to deal with the same systems that we've been dealing with for hundreds of years. Because without that, there will be no change. We have to honor what's been done before us. And that's what keeps me motivated, because I know that over my 30-something years working, before I got sick and I'm home now, that's what I feel particularly proud of. My work with students, my work with youth, my work with people at the beginning of their careers, my work with organizations that have an idea and they need to push that idea forward, my work in the research policy area, where I'm not afraid to say what will be and what needs to happen. And that's the gift God gave me. I'm very grateful.
That's absolutely beautiful. Staying in a space of gratitude for all that you do. And not only that, just the fact that your work, your body of work has spanned decades and impacted hundreds, if not thousands of lives. So once again, I thank you for all that you do for so many, and the genuine and authenticity that you come to this work with. So many folks struggle with speaking truth to power, and the fact that you've been able to do it in a way that has always maintained your integrity, your dignity, and created a pathway for young folks like myself. I'm not young, but for folks like myself as well, I think is incredible. So once again, I honor you, give you your flowers while you're here in front of me for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So my next question is, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And how are you and your team working to overcome some of these challenges?
Well, let's start with when I was working, the challenges were getting accommodated, being believed as a Black woman with invisible chronic illness. The challenges are always being expected to do more than others and managing a disability at the same time. And that Black woman troops that we're strong, we're invincible, and that we just plug through. So that combination for me as an individual with disabilities has been very difficult. And that has carried forward as we worked with the team to put together the ASE Community Foundation. This organization is led primarily by Black people with disabilities. So you can imagine one of our biggest challenges is fitting into the deadlines, the processes, and the systems that are ableist or anti-Black or gender biased as we enter some of the funding streams, or as we enter some of the spaces that have not opened the doors to have this conversation. We still suffer as Black women that talk a lot, that say a lot, and we still hear this aggressive, not easy to get along with. But you know what? If my mother was easy to get along with, I don't think I would have made it through school and got a degree. And she wouldn't have made it in Canada as the only person from her family, as a maid when she got here. I don't think my grandmother would have made it in Jamaica without all of this tenacity to get it done and to say what needs to be said. I don't think my great grandmother would have made it through apprenticeship and those struggles if they didn't have this sense of integrity and what is right is right. Do the right thing and have integrity in what you do. And I guarantee you'll be able to go home and go to your bed or go to your family, your loved ones, and be happy in yourself. And if integrity is not a value, others will see it and pick it up immediately. And you can do and be rich and do all those things with different values. But at the end of the day, things will fall apart if it's not done in a way that is inclusive, authentic, and is based in values and integrity. You might have to walk away because you're just not going to do it. You might take hits on your performance review. You might lose a sponsor, right? You might not get a grant because they want you to do something different. You might not get that research grant because SSHRC is looking for something else. You might not get your paper published because it's too Black, it's too radical, it's too this. But if you hold steady on the truth and where you come from as a person, as a family, then you will make the change that you're looking for.
Ashe, ashe, ashe.
Yeah.
Thank you for so much for those words of wisdom that I think are so applicable to all community stalwarts and leaders and young folks that are coming up, trying to do this serious work of systems transformation, systemic transformation, social justice work. So I give thanks for those jewels and those wise words. You indeed wise counsel.
One of the major barriers for our organization is there isn't any money to pay for accommodations in any of the funding. So if we received $10,000 like everybody else for a fund, we have to take money out of that fund instead of programming or a computer or whatever to pay for the accommodation of a staff, a volunteer, interns, or participants who have disabilities. So when you're running an event, you may not have all the accessible technology there, but we have to have it always available. I want everybody to understand, especially funders and donors, those who have funded us, those that just send money to us, thank you so much. They get it. We use that money to accommodate because any of the funding proposals do only say it's for programming. So if we are going to hire 5 people with disabilities and each has $1,000 accommodation, that's $5,000 away from programming. And how is that accessible? How is that possible? And another challenge is, of course, be into white spaces that have been disability spaces have been white. Walking into disability spaces that have been gendered, women. Walking into disability spaces with people that don't have disabilities running organizations. Walking into spaces where you know there's a fear over difference, that what's going to happen, and that there's a stereotype that these Black women are too aggressive. We don't like that. We'll use somebody else. You know, my team's not ready for that, which we've been told. They have to protect their team from training by us. Can you imagine? This is the kind of challenge that is unseen. And of course, that challenge is also on within the Black diaspora, and our fears and our stigmas over even a conversation around disability and what kind of additional barriers and marks against your name if you were to disclose it. So we live in this space, but and it is very difficult on your mental health. And as most people with disabilities usually have comorbid disabilities, such as chronic illness will come with some anxiety and depression, and so we're not talking just anxiety from, experiencing racism. We're talking clinical anxiety because of the level of pain people experience every day. So it's very different, and it's not just a conversation on mental wellness and that coping mechanisms, because when you have disabilities, it's not about coping mechanisms. It's about the symptoms, either of the medication or your condition, and whether they're episodic or not, and whether you can work a job or take a contract as an employer and as a consultant and actually guarantee the 3 weeks of work. And so what you find is this is a major challenge. And that's why we're particularly really pleased with the work and the research we've been doing. Diverse learners, Black diverse learners, youth, on the Black entrepreneurs with disabilities, our Black Hub, where we're putting resources for free so people can confidentially find maybe a Black speech pathologist. It's not just about mental wellness. It's about an educational assessment for my child, so my child doesn't have to go through the school system's assessment, but I want a Black psychologist that does it. That's why we exist. So thank you for letting me add that, a huge challenge for us, and always looking for support for ourselves, for the people that we work with, for assessments for them because they're not free, and on any relationships with those that can create pathways.
Thank you for your strength, your tenacity, and your clear conviction for the beneficiaries of the many services that you provide at ASE. So once again, thank you. My next question, you kind of segued to it a little bit. Do you have a set of priorities right now in your work? And you mentioned the hub. Could you articulate a little bit more about the hub? Because some remarkable.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to look for blackhub.ca, and it is a free to submit and to obviously to search. It is a virtual hub. It has 3 categories. It has services, resources, and resource directory, and then a knowledge catalog. So if we want to pull together researchers and articles and journals and YouTube channels like this one we'll probably put up, of people doing work at the intersection of Blackness and disability. And so it's easier because it's so hard to find people who you might be able to do joint projects with. And the next one is the disability resources, which is any resource that helps persons with disabilities, and particularly, getting the disability tax credit, getting the registered disability savings plan, which Black people don't. I'm heading off on Wednesday to meet the new minister of the CRA and talk about the disability tax credit, as we know that our community does not receive it or even apply for it for so many reasons. And we talk about all of these things and all of these processes. So if you don't know that you're a student with disabilities and you could get up to $4,000 on a bursary each semester from OSAP, then you need to come to the directory and take a look at those processes. So, and then of course, service is many. Yes, it's mental health, but it's also doulas, midwives, somebody that can come to your home, the personal support workers that are hired that you can just look for. We have psychiatrists, family doctors, chiropractors, massage therapists, and the tutors, and the list goes on. And the reason is, and we asked you to submit, right now we're in migration to a new server, so it's not working right now, but we'll put out a presentation, we'll be inviting, because this is your opportunity to work with Black clients. This is your opportunity to help Black people with disabilities, whether you're white or Black or whatever you are, to get the resources that they need. So if you're an organization and you have a program, we want you to list yourself there. And this gives people with disabilities agency over their own plan. Because what we also know is there's lots of gatekeepers, which Black people experience, gatekeepers about our health, gatekeepers about employment, gatekeepers, etc. But one thing people don't actually understand is, as people with disabilities, there's a huge gatekeeping idea that we have to be served and helped. So what happens is you've got this old model of disability, which still exists alive and well, that is people without disability giving to what they think that person with disability needs. What I'm saying is, we don't want that. We don't need that. And that's not going to continue. When you look at Black people with disabilities, we are very much capable of making our own decisions. And this hub's idea is to give us that agency to be able to do that.
Black organizations, nonprofits, charities, and the philanthropic sector. With that being said, right, if you had a message to some of the leaders in the Black community that's our leading philanthropic foundations, leading nonprofits and charities that are grant makers. What message would you give them specifically as it relates to the intersectionality between Blackness and different abilities and the needs that ASE requires?
Take an intersectionality approach. I mean, to just having to say that after how many years of a community is actually quite saddening. To remember that Black people in themselves, it's not just the big, broad Black diaspora coming from which country, which faith, which whatever. Within us, there's gender and there's discrimination there. There's gender identity, definite discrimination there. There is the LGBTQ plus community and two-spirited. These communities exist and they're always left on the margins. And disability, how can disability be off be off the criteria? There's two things I would ask when it comes to disability. First, when you're deciding on funding, create a separate pool and criteria to ensure that disability and Blackness, disability and gender disability and faith is there. Because all too often, people check boxes, and disability means it should be done by people with disabilities. And it means that the people who are doing disability should have expertise. So you can't just check a box and then say, we're going to help 15 clients who have disabilities and not bring in a disability consultant and not make sure they have the proper assessments and accommodation plans and not provide all the other resources they need. You can't say you're working with people with disabilities and not doing all of that. So I'll caution everyone. Now everybody's jumping on the intersectionality. So I noticed a lot of other funds that were predominantly given to white organizations are now using intersectionality. So encouraging them to be more intersectional. Please be clear, intersectionality doesn't mean you write the word Black or disabled or gender, and then you hire somebody at the bottom to run those programs. Intersectionality means from the very top, who are your advisors, who's on your board, who are your senior leaders, who are the ones with permanent jobs, who are the ones that make decisions, change makers in your organization. Do you have an equity policy? Do you have an equity committee at all? Have you done an audit of your disability policies? Do you have a disability policy? You know, you can take a look at Imagine Canada's equity seeking benchmark, which ASE participated on very thoroughly, even rewriting questions to make it make more sense. And you will see that small organizations like us, they continue to be dedicated, or those at the margins of intersectionality continue to be dedicated to these issues of equity and, you know, and for us, by us, and ultimately nothing for us without us. But as you get more and bigger, no matter what race the organization is or culture, there's very less and less and less equity committees. Where are the equity committees? Where are the equity policies? Where are the statements? And, you know, just for our sake, we do these audits for our sake and take a look at, say, disability organizations that receive funding over the last 15 years, maybe 20, they don't even have a disability hiring priority, you know. But then if you look at new Black organizations, do you have an equity committee? So intersectionality isn't checking a box, and intersectionality doesn't mean, okay, we're going to help all people with disabilities, and then we're going to throw on these people because that's the new hashtag. And it doesn't mean we're going to be Black and we're going to throw on some people. What it means is when you look at your funding models, you look at statistics, you look at data. There's very little data on this as well, which is why we need money to do this research. But look at it. If we know that 40% of Canadians have disabilities of one form in their life, you can have temporary too. why is this not something that is considered when writing every grant, when creating funds, when creating training? It's not just, a wheelchair ramp. And so I really want to encourage people when they're looking at it, looking at what they're doing, please create a separate pool for this population inside your pool to make sure they're not left out. And it's done through that for us, by us approach, or from that nothing without us. And of course, provide money for accommodations on top of the programming money. So if the organization is going to hire somebody, or they prioritize hiring people with disabilities, which is what we want, which is the federal act wants people to do, then you have to have a different pool where the employer or the organization can go and say, this is the accommodation needs, and I need this, this, and this, a request. That's very important. And on the flip side, if you are going to be more intersectional, you have to bring experts in to do it. And if you're in the Black community, bring in Black experts who have disabilities. Bring in a Shay. Bring in people that have a background in it. It's that same thing. Just because you're Black doesn't mean you know all those other intersectionalities. And just because you have a person with disability doesn't mean they can understand Blackness. And so what you really want to do, regardless of where the funding is and what type of organization you have, you really want to look at the infrastructure of those organizations to truly do this work. You want to ensure that the intersectionality is true and involves. You want to ensure that there is some kind of a training or infrastructure. And if you're going to run a program and you're going to put somebody there to run one of these groups, that position better be full-time and continuing. Figure it out, because all you're doing is repeating that precarious work situation. And we know that Black people with disabilities have the highest unemployment and underemployment in Canada per ratio. We also know that Black women with disabilities and our sole support parents have the highest rate of poverty in Canada. So if, as a Black community, we can't see this, or we choose not to, or we choose to think everybody gets money, then it's not going to work, because it doesn't work for the same reason. That's the reason we got Black money, because that system wasn't working for us. It's exact same. So I really want to encourage people to truly understand and include those voices at your tables, on your boards. And I would really not want to see organizations now all of a sudden saying disability without a statement, without a whole initiative to support those people.
Thank you.
And that's where Shay comes in, because we have a service model where we're offering a disability, race disability certificate in understanding how to do this, or doing an audit for your organization, or coming in and doing training, understanding how to accommodate somebody, or telling a person with disabilities how to accommodate. One of our newest interests right now are refugees and immigrants with disabilities. Because again, there's this big fear over, I can't have a disability because Immigration Canada, if you're immigrating, doesn't want you to have a disability. If you come as a refugee, chances are you have something, maybe some trauma, anxiety or something, but none of it is ever discussed in settlement. And, just this recent thing that happened in Toronto is a sign. Nobody can experience this and walk away okay. An experience that brought them to this country, to those streets. And so I really challenge our community and the broader disability community to please consider the way disability works and plays out for each individual, and it's different. And it's going to take a lot of education, a lot of commitment, and a lot of unlearning of colonial ableist views to get us to the point where we value people's work more than we value the capitalist output that people can produce, because that's where that comes from. At the end of the day, ableism came out of all that colonialism, ableism, sexism, patriarchy, racism, anti-Black racism, ageism. It's all based on who you are and what you can produce. And people with disabilities were seen as a burden to society. I'm not a burden to society. I just can't work the way I used to, because society doesn't have a system, and work doesn't have a system that allows for part-time, sort of precarious, like work. I can work now, but I can't work for 2 more months. The system isn't set up like that. But when you start to look at invisible disabilities, you start to look at neurodiversity, and that's not just autism, that's ADHD. That also includes mental health. When you start to look at episodic disabilities, including AIDS, you start to understand is people are living their lives. And when I tell people diabetes type 1 is a disability that you can get tax breaks and the RDSP and all that, they're like, really? Yes, because it's a critical illness. And that's more money. It's more money for diets. It's more money because of the medication, etc. The government has things for those individuals, but in our community, I don't know if we've still internalizing colonial values. We are, particularly along disability and the shame that families feel when they have a child that has a disability, or that person's feeling of that shame, which is, and the fear that it's going to change the trajectory of your life if you say anything. And I have to be honest, I didn't ask for an accommodation till I was 47 years old. And I do believe if I had asked earlier, my career wouldn't have gone as far as it went, because when I did ask, my career stopped. That exact fear. And that was not just a stop because, I was really sick. It's also a stop that there's anti-Black racism, there is gender bias, and because women, and Black women apparently can experience more pain, and we're not going to go to work and break down in tears. And, there's so many things that make us different. And then, that gender bias in employment. So, men can keep working, but women in their 50s, they start to get weeded out. And the research keeps demonstrating this as well. So imagine being Black, being a woman, and having a disability and being in your 50s. And we challenge our Black leaders to think about people like us. We know it's critical for Black people with disabilities, but it's critical for all people. And so if there's this money, what are we doing?
Perfect. Well, one, I really want to thank you for laying out a pathway or a roadmap for leaders in our community, in the Black community, to be able to act in solidarity and to actually move with integrity, especially around resource allocation and ensuring that there's an intersectional approach. I agree with you completely. I think the veneer of representation is very problematic, and just the performative practices that many institutions, whether it be the public, philanthropic, or private sectors, play out when it comes to folks with disabilities. But not just that, when we speak of the intersectionality that you mentioned. So my next question is specifically around, what is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like to you and your colleagues at ASE?
Ultimate goal. Well, our vision is to see the full participation of Black people with disabilities in Canada. That's the vision. Full participation means they can walk into a restaurant and not experience racism, sexism, ableism. It's that they can sit where they want to, they can order what they want, they can walk and they can apply for a job, and their last name's not going to make a difference. And they won't, and when they go to the interview, they don't have to ask for an accommodation. It's that the interview itself has already accommodated. We want to make sure that Black people with disabilities know they have any option. You can stay home, if that's best and healthy for you. There's nothing wrong with that. No one says you have to work. But also, if you want to be a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, we want to make those paths accessible and free of anti-Black racism and all the other isms that we experience. That's it. And let people have an opportunity to be a part of it. And I think that I can't say anything else. That's it. And what is success? Well, success, there's milestones in success. The milestones in success is the more communities, and that would be Black communities, start to talk about disability, and we can get the stigma within the Black community to a minimum. We can have cross-cultural conversations about faith and culture and all that, but we still acknowledge that it's okay to have a disability. You're not a deficit. You're not any of these things. And it's okay to acknowledge it. It's okay to be identified. It's okay and definitely important and critical to get accommodations. We'll teach how to advocate. You go into those employment settings, you go into those entrepreneurship, you go into the spaces, and you get the life that you want. That's what I want. I want the Black community to support that. And then on the other side, because of who I am, I'm not going to let up with the standard of how Black people have been treated in the system that has been set up deliberately until the master's house, Audre Lorde. So that is what I believe. That should be it. If we're going to do it, we have to do it differently. Black people cannot just reproduce what white people have done, because it's the same systems that have kept most of us out of reach of it. We really, as a community, need to think broadly, bring our allies in, because the work that we've been doing, we have to do it with allies, right? We've got allies from all communities. I talk about difficult in the disability community, but I have allies. I have people that call me up and are keeping me up or explaining things. We're out of the team, right? We're out of the club. You know, there's people in the Black community like you, Victor, like Lieben and others that said, hey, Lisa, that's a great idea. What can we do to support you? That's what we have to do. We have to be grateful, thankful for those that do it, and we have to expect it to be done. I expect the Black community to go through this journey with us. And I expect society in Canada to make way for all of us as a Black community to go forward. And that's what I expect.
Ashe. Well, Liz, you are a warrior in solidarity. You are a future ancestor, and you are a beloved sister, colleague, mother, matriarch, and so many
Don't forget.
grandmother, and you truly bring a tremendous amount of joy. It's not just my life, but many others. But you also have created a pathway for us to continue this work of speaking truth to power and ensuring that no one is left behind. So we honor you while you're here. We honor you all the many, many years to come, that you'll continue this fight, this intergenerational struggle for justice, access, inclusion, diversity, and equity. And we just give thanks and honor you. Thank you.
I already know it will happen. Because when we started, conversations around disability in the Black community were very limited, and we're getting more conversations. And with the disability community, they know that these conversations need to happen. The comfort level in what we expect is different, but at least we can actually put Black and disability together now. I know it's going to happen. I know it will, just like our ancestors knew slavery was going to end. They knew, they knew the next generation would have a better chance than the generation before. And I know that this generation will have a wonderful opportunity to move our community forward, and their generation after them. And I already know there's no moving back.
There's no going back. Ashe, ashe, ashe. So we'll close the way we began this interview by acknowledging our creator, the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we share, build, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Liz, for all that you do for so many. Ashe.
You for having me. I love it. And looking forward to people reaching out, partnering. We are always interested in doing work with others who want to learn about how to work with people with disabilities. So ashe, and all the blessings for everyone as they move. Thank you for watching and moving forward with your passion and love for people.